Hi, I'm Mark Wybrow and this is the Electronic Cafe, the channel for the lovers of electronic music.
And I'm Andy McNabb. So let's get started. So welcome to another brilliant interview edition of the Electronic Cafe. In this episode, Mark and I will show you our chat with the rather amazing JJ Jeczalik, one of the pioneers of ZTT Records, working with Trevor and Dudley, etc., but also the man behind the sounds of some classic albums such as the Propaganda Secret Wish stuff, ABC, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. He's even worked with Peter Gabriel, Kate Bush. The list goes on and on and on. We were absolutely honoured to meet this guy. He was the first kind of Fairlight engineer for ZTT. Just an amazing man, incredibly humble, really smart, but amazing stories and some real background to some of the songs that we've all grown to love over the last 40 years or so. So sit back and enjoy this great chat with the incredible JJ Jeczalik.
Every great album coming out of that specific time just seems to be coming from you guys. I mean, you know, Propaganda, Art of Noise, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. It seemed just a non-stop amazing output of incredible stuff. And you know, from the outside, it looked like you guys are being exhausted and just outputting. Was it as mad as it looked from the outside where you were in the eye of the storm?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to answer it in a minute when I have plugged in my power supply. Because I'm just
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode where we get to chat to a massive hero of ours who's had so much to do with some of the biggest songs in our lives, and a key part of the legendary ZTT crew and founder member of the Art of Noise. JJ Jeczalik, this is a massive warm welcome from Mark and I to the Electronic Cafe. We are delighted to have you here, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here as well.
Yeah, morning JJ, thank you for giving your time up. It's difficult to know where to start really, because me and Andy was in bands from the mid-80s through to the 2000s, and me as a synthesizer player was always fascinated by the name JJ.
Why did he laugh then?
Because he's a massive synth fan and loves it.
Yeah. I wonder whether you're questioning his abilities on the keyboard.
They was that for the outtake.
But you know, as a synth player myself, I was always fascinated by the records that I bought that had the name JJ Jeczalik on it. And I mean, I've got a list here: just ABC, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Art of Noise, Propaganda, Pet Shop Boys, Visage, Godly and Cream, Yes, Kate Bush, Peter Gabriel, Malcolm McLaren. It goes on and on and on. Seemingly during the 80s, you were one of the go-to people when it came to sampling and Fairlight synthesizers. So how did that all happen? How did you get involved in that?
Okay, that's a good question, because we need to spool back a bit to one Richard James Burgess, who was a drummer and latterly producer, and he was in a band called Landscape, and also was doing sessions with the likes of Andy Pask, who now plays with Hans Zimmer. He also, I think, co-wrote the tune to The Bill, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so they were our local pub band when I lived in North London. and we used to go and see him a lot. And one thing led to another, and I ended up driving Richard's drums around to sessions, knowing absolutely nothing, essentially just taking his gear and, he'd showed me how to set it up, and hopefully pretty quick learner in those days, and set his gear up and then wait for him to finish the session. And that was a pretty mad period too, as well, because he was obviously very good, sort of metronomic, almost machine-like player. And he on a busy day, he'd be doing 2 or 3, 4 sessions a day, and I'd be hurtling around London. Often it would be commercials, actually. So lots of small studios, lots of places that I'm sure no longer exist. But I kind of just got into the whole music scene that way. And what happened? Oh, yeah. We decided that in our house we wanted to have a party, and we booked landscape at the local arts centre. And I sold all my tickets for profit. And I thought, whoo, this is a good game. I'll do this. And then we helped them load in and load out. And then they said to me, you got a van, do you want to help us? So I kind of ended up helping them. And over time, spent a lot of time going in and out of studios. I did my stint on the road, driving a 4.5-ton truck from Aberdeen to, I don't know, Essex, sort of overnight, because that's the way people didn't manage to program things without Google Maps, and all that stuff. I helped Andy build the PA for the band. So I started again I'm a geographer, right? From I'm good at colours. So, but I learned about DI boxes, and I learned about soldering, and I learned about all that stuff because I had a friend, Nick, and he was BBC trained. So I learned all that stuff, the proper way to edit, the proper way to solder, and old school, really, I suppose you'd call it. And I was saying to Richard, I want to become a drummer. And he said, don't become a drummer. You should read this book. And it was a book called The Mighty Micro. And I found it the other day, and it's still in my storage. I can't remember the name of the guy, but basically he made all these predictions about online stuff on the internet. And he was wild in his predictions. And he was 30 years too slow. Yeah. And I suddenly realized what was going on. And I thought, wow. And Richard was all into programming the early sequences and all that sort of stuff. So he said, no, don't play drums. Learn how to type. I went, oh, seriously? He said, yeah, it's the way. That's the way. It's all going that way. And I was going, wow, this is a bit of a mind bender.
'Cause when I am unhappy, there's nothing that can move me. Some say that knowledge is something that you never have. Some say that knowledge is something that's in your lap. Some say that heaven is hell. Some say that hell is heaven. I understand just when I think I'm clear.
Around that time, Richard was sessioning for the Buggles, Jeff Downs, Trevor Horn, and doing Top of the Pops, and you were there all day, and someone had to look after the gear, and that was me. And Jeff and Trevor had a guy who was looking after their stuff, and he wandered off and left a whole load of Jeff's keyboards on the stage. So I packed them up and took them home and said, I've got your keyboards, Jeff. What do you want to do with them? He said, oh, can you take them to the studio? And they phoned me up 2 days later and said, do you want a job? So Richard had said to me, the only thing you have to know is be half an hour early, right? And that's it. Be professional, be early. So then I started working for Jeff and Trevor, and they were writing a new album, which I think was Adventures in Modern Recording. Can't remember. And next thing I know, they're rehearsing with the remnants of Yes, who I wasn't a fan of, can I say. I was more Herb Alpert than Tijuana Brass, if you really want to know. Very long days, blah, 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 blah. And Jeff then bought this Fairlight thing and used it extensively on the drama album. And then we did a tour. And after that, came back and he said, I think, it'd be a good idea if we can get the Fairlight earning some money while I'm rehearsing. Because by then, and I may have got the timeline wrong, but the kind of Jeff and Trevor had sort of broken up as a unit. And I think that Yes configuration deconstructed itself, and Asia appeared. And I know, because I was there, that Trevor Rabin came in to play guitar alongside Steve Howe in one of the potential iterations of Asia. And I remember using a cassette recorder to record their demos, because they basically used to play and they go record, which is how they did everything. And then they'd listen to it and go, yeah, that's a good bit. And they were doing the crap. Let's contrast that. Let's repeat that. Let's align that, which I didn't understand at the time. So they blow through a couple of choruses and then start constructing arrangements. Heat of the Moment, I remember very well. It had the vibe straight up. I mean, it was the biggest selling AOR, the most copied and downloaded, most bootlegged as it was in those days, single in America that year, which upset Jeff quite a lot, obviously. But I was out doing sessions while he wasn't using the Fairlight. And then one day I got a call from the McCartney lot, and I ended up in Air Studios with Jeff Emerick, McCartney, and Martin. And we were up there, and the heavens opened, and the glass void between the live room and us filled with water. Right, so we had to stop because it was one of those torrential downpours. Meanwhile, I got a call saying Jeff needs you back at the rehearsal studio because there's a window's blown in and his keyboards are getting wet. So I went to Macca, I got to go, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I understand. And I went back and we sorted out all Jeff's stuff. And Jeff said to me, you can't leave me on my own. I'm really sorry. This is not going to work. And I went back and Macca said, you got to be here all the time. I'm really sorry. We're going to have to get someone else. So I kind of went, oh, okay, no, I kind of understand that because Richard Burgess says, be professional, be on time, right? And I was in neither place, and then I was not on time. So I understood that, and it was, I've talked about it to people. It was a bit harsh. I go, no, I was trying to do two jobs. It wasn't going to work. And eventually I had a chat with Jeff, and I said, I think I'm going to go off and do this on my own now. And I found him someone called Pete to replace me, because Pete would work with me on the Yes Tour. So that was a simple transition. And that was it. And I then started blagging Fairlights to go off and do sessions.
First Buffalo gal go around the outside, round the outside, round the outside. You know it. Two Buffalo gals go around the outside, round the outside, round the outside. Three Buffalo gals go around the outside.
Wow.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think in '82, a Fairlight cost about 30 grand, which in today's money is probably about over £100,000. So, I mean, it was only available to the limited few, wasn't it, really?
I was very lucky in that I came in at one of those synchronicity points where I just happened to be in the right place, right time, and this thing arrived. And contrary to popular opinion, as I remember it, the manual was only about that thick.
Oh, really?
There was nothing in it at all that I remember. And it was kind of, there may have been a technical thing, which is bigger, but the thing that you looked at was, and there's an awful lot of experimentation. And Psycho Systems used to have these sessions every month where we'd go around and people would say what they're doing with it, which I found really useful. And I met Blue there, Blue Weaver, who keyboard player, and Bee Gees and Kate Bush and all that lot. And everybody was fairly open about what they were doing. But spinning back to the McCartney session, he said, I've got this trombone sample. I want to turn it into a horn section. So he put it in, and I tried to loop it, get bits to repeat, so there was a bit of sustain. And it sounded like a Hoover on acid. It was just mad. And he turned to me and he said, well, that's not a horn section. I said, well, it's like a Hoover. It's like a trombone. It's not a horn section. And I said, if you want a horn section, you've got to sample the horn section. He said, I thought you could do anything. I said, well, no, that's part of the myth. That's why I'm here, Paul, to explode all these myths. And it was about that time I realized that actually recording and sampling and trying to loop instruments was a complete waste of time. Because it didn't sound good. you had under half a second at the default sample rate, which I doubled and got 14K bandwidth, I think, for a second and a half. So it sounded terrible. I got a bit more time out of it. And it struck me that recording trombones and things just wasn't where it was at.
Yeah.
Lots of people were doing that. Lots of people were doing that kind of whole thing. So I ended up just going mad and just recording any sounds that I thought would be interesting.
Well, I was going to say, because I bought a sampler. I had a sampler in 90s, a lot later version of the sampler. And when I first got it, it became a little bit obsessive that every sound you listen to, you want to sample, you want to use it, or you want to try and loop it. But what you was doing, which was so fantastic, was the manipulation of the sounds so that it wasn't instantly recognizable as you sampled this. It was like using it, cutting it up, reversing it, adding reverbs or whatever onto it, making it into a totally different sound from the DNA of the original sample.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, quite a lot of what I did was desperation, to be honest, because everybody thought I knew what I was doing. And, there I was, a definite non-muso. I mean, I played a bit of clarinet very badly and couldn't play drums to save my life. The only time I played the snare in the school orchestra, we were doing the Gates of Kiev, and I came off a bar early for the snare drum roll. And every time I hear that music, I get a bit shaky. So that was a very short muso career. But the revelation was, don't put music into it. Don't put musical sounds into it. And so, taking a couple of random examples, if you take Paranoia, right? We had these stage kids come in and going, the art of noise is paranoid. And they're going, paranoid. I went, that's a bit dull, And I said, let's do something. So I like to describe it as a loaf of sliced bread. You've got a white loaf and it's pretty uniform. It's got an end, it's got a beginning. If you could swap it all around, it wouldn't make any difference at all. It's the same. And that's a synth, right? Unless it's got lots of modulation and other stuff. Basically, it's a whole load of lines which you can interchange, okay? Sampling, it's doing this, and, up and down and round and all, in time, modulation, the whole thing. And so I spotted this bit in the sample of Paranoid that I got of them. And I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. And I went to the middle, and I highlighted the middle, and I flipped the middle round. Just the middle, right? And then maybe a bit more. And Paranoia, press the keyboard, Paranoia came out. And everybody goes, oh, that's good. So then, cut the front off, Paranoia, and Paranoia. But that was because I felt that the Paranoid was a bit dull, done before.
Sure.
So that's where I ended up spinning that and getting that entirely new thing. Right, so there's a story I heard about Ozzy Osbourne, because I think there were times when he wasn't able to sing. They decided to get someone else in, and they couldn't hack it because basically the problem was that he was floating across this backing track in his own time. And if you listen to it with this insight now, it's amazing because he's there, but he's like way off, right? And then he's back, and then he's way off, and it's this floating thing. It's extraordinary. And again, post-rationalizing, what happened with us putting down electronic rigid backing tracks, Anne would play, and you get that floaty thing. So you had that wonderful combo of solid and float. And the movement, which brings me on to the other thing, which is the problem with these modern doors, or whatever they call them, is that if you're not careful, because it will quantize everything, and because it will give you your delays in perfect time, everything's in time.
Yeah.
And it all, for me, it all starts to stand still and get it. It's kind of like there's something odd about it. I can't, and sonically it changes things, which I don't understand. But Gary used to count 11 beats, right?
Wow.
With a stopwatch, and that will be the main delay time. You should try it one day. And you divide it or subdivide it or extend it to get multiples thereof. You count 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Stop. That's your delay time. Okay? For the song. There's several things about that. And that is that it's not 100% accurate. So when you dial in the delay time and when you spin it over a track that is in time, you get this movement. Because all the half notes and quarter notes and 16th notes are not dropping right on the money.
Yeah.
They're floating. And then if you spin them as well, the whole thing starts to do this wave.
Yeah.
You know, really, really, really.
Nice.
So JJ, correct me if I'm wrong. You started working. You was working on the Yes album, and I think the story goes, or so I've read it, that there was an outtake of the drum track that you started working on with Gary Langan.
Correct.
That he thought was really interesting, and you manipulated, which became basis of. If you look at a sequence, there's a 12-inch version of Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Yep.
Duck Rock, Malcolm McLaren, Into Art of Noise, which is kind of like, that seems to be a timeline that you can hear this progression go through.
Yep.
Can you just tell us a bit about that? I mean, you took away that disregarded drum loop and you worked on Gary one night on a Friday, Gary was saying, I've got this really good idea, and I was going, oh, Gary, you know, we've been here for 15 hours, Chris Squire turned up 10 hours late, I really want to go home, blah, blah, blah. He said, no. You'll love this. And he played this track, which was basically a bass drum and a snare in a groove that I think he'd recorded somewhere like Air or Townhouse. And he'd discovered that the talkback mic, which was hung in the center of the room over the drum kit in the live room, was creating this incredible racket, almost by mistake, I think. And he decided to record it. And eventually he was saying, Alan, don't play your cymbals. No, don't play your hi-hat. No, don't. Just go boom, chack, boom, chack, boom, chack. And what, tom-toms? Oh, okay, right. So, but he basically got this thing. And he said, listen to this. And I'm going, bloody hell, what a racket. So he said, let's sample it. Let's just bung it in and see what happens. And so I cranked up my sample time to 1.5 seconds. I wasn't really paying attention, and I sampled it and I looped it up, right? Little did I know that I'd sampled it on beat 3 of the bar. So when you pressed the sample, it went snare, bass drum, right? And the snare was, say, 4, right? The next bass drum was 4 and the next bass drum was 1. Yeah? You can see the issue here right away.
Yeah.
So, but I just looped it up, okay, and it happened to be across the bar line because it worked. And we didn't have a tempo readout in those days. We just had a clock. So we just nudged it, and we're going, that's looping. That's great. And then we just started building 8-bar loops, and then we put some fills in and all that sort of stuff, and built essentially the big construct of Close to the Edit. And we sampled ourselves, we did some finger pops, and we went, money, turn that round, that's Enum, you know, an old fave.
The Yes track, Owner of a Lonely Heart, was a pivotal track. I mean, the way it's cut up and the way it works. And the 12-inch version of that, I mean, hands up, I'm guilty. I didn't really hear until a few months ago. But the 12-inch version of that could be an Art of Noise track.
Definitely one of those formative things.
Yeah. So you listen to the 12-inch and you think, wow, there's stuff in that 12-inch which was before Art of Noise, which you can clearly hear the Art of Noise in that remix.
I think it was basically Julian Mendelssohn, Trevor, me, and Chris Squire came in late one night, and I kind of. Are you talking about the red and blue mixes? That's what it's called.
Yeah, that's the one.
Absolutely mad. And I put some. Chris was saying, "Oh, just give me some stuff," and Julian understood what to do with it. He was spinning it and compressing it and doing all that stuff to make it move, I played some stuff in. Chris played some stuff in. It was all recorded live. It was sequenced but live.
Yeah.
And then Trevor would say, "Oh, that's a good bit." They print that bit, and then I think Julian just slashed it all together on a half-inch tape.
I mean, it's a mind-blowing remix because it's mad what's going on, and you can hear the beginnings of what you did a couple of years later.
Yeah, I think that's right. It basically proved to Trevor, certainly to me, I think that all this stuff was coming together. I spent a lot of time doing other sessions, and they go, "Have you got anything for us?" And I play a sound, which I had used before, and they go, "Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't sound like that on so and so." And you go, "Yeah, but that's that. It's leaving me, right?" And there's a lot of stuff that goes on.
Yeah,
the engineering, if you want to use it, a better term, that turns it into what it is. And I then began to realise that Gary and Julian and that lot down there were masters of turning these pretty awful sounds, to be honest, in terms of their sonics, right, into these magic events.
Yeah.
The delays, the pre-delays, the reverbs, the stop reverbs, and using them as a point from which to start, rather than being the final thing.
It was amazing, and obviously from Art of Noise, JJ. ZTT with Trevor and Gary. Yeah, as Mark mentioned earlier, there's that mad time where every great album coming out of that specific time just seems to be coming from you guys. I mean, Propaganda, Art of Noise, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. It seemed just a non-stop amazing output of incredible stuff. And from the outside, it looked like you guys are being exhausted and just outputting. Was it as mad as it looked from the outside where you were in the eye of the storm?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to answer it in a minute when I have plugged in my power supply. Because I'm just about to go red. All right, coffee.
All good.
JJ, quick question before Andy dives back in with that stellar question. On ABC, on Lexicon of Love album, that's very different to kind of like the normal, the stuff you was doing. Your involvement in that, that's more sort of strings and Lush and Dudley and stuff, but there's samples in there, I guess, that bit where it goes evil and things like that. Was that part of it you? Or was you involved in sampling strings and stuff?
Okay, so no, the strings were all live and real. And that was the interesting thing that Trevor used to do, was that he completely got the shape thing and the live thing. And so there's Fairlight doing little bits and pieces that gave angles and shapes and a different form, the alignment and proximity stuff. And then you have this sweeping beautifulness, which is not clearly a synthesizer at all. And it's real, so you have to that magic mix, and he understood how you kind of put that together. To get something to work. So evil, speak no evil. I sampled Julian Mendelssohn saying that. Oh wow! Detuned him a bit, which is my basic trick, right? And And then I just started goofing around, and Trevor came in and said, "Oh, put that down, put that down." So I said, "Well, you know, famously known as a not keeper place. So just do it, just do it." So Julian said, I'll run it past you and just go over it, and we'll rehearse it a bit. And so little did I know, he went into record, and I went, "Speak now, speak now, speak now." He went, "Great, it's done." I said, "No, I can do it better than that." He said, "No, you've done it, mate," because he didn't tell me he was in record. And that was really clever, because I would have got the, you know, never having played at all. It was like, "Oh, just keep going, have a bit of fun." Trevor said, "Perfect, great." And that was the thing, the decision. It's a print, move on. So that was my first ever keyboard digitizing performance. So
thank you, JJ. That was just my fanboy thing that popped into my head.
Well, thank you for spotting it
while you was getting your coffee. Thank you.
So yeah, so that was. But no, with the ABC, it was mainly I was in there for the gags. The rest of it was fairly serious. I mean, you got ABC had everything, right? And we do the Lex Rock with them and all that sort of business. And it's amazing watching the fans. They're singing all the words. So you had these fantastic lyrics. You had a great singer. And Martin can still hack it. He's got a great band. You got all the guys, Mark, drummer, you know, rock solid, blah, blah, blah. So you had the lyrics, you had the front guy, you had the band who was very tight. Then you had Trevor doing these sort of weird and wonderful things and recording it and then putting the strings on. And so it just was one of those collisions of lots of things together.
Did it work? I think it's one of the best albums of the 80s.
It still sounds fantastic. I remember going to Hammersmith Odeon. We've gone off topic here a little bit, but I remember going to Hammersmith Odeon to pick up my Duran Duran tickets in 1982. Right. And they were selling the Lexicon of Love tour tickets at the same time.
Okay.
The old days when you had to go to the box office and buy tickets. And I regret, even though I saw the Lexicon of Love at Drury Lane a few years ago with Anne Dudley and everything, I regret not seeing that original tour in '82 because I mean that album sounded brilliant then, and it hasn't dated now. No. It still sounds brilliant. And I often find that some albums, using an example, say Duran Duran, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, which used a Fairlight, which was like the cutting edge of everything, because it was the cutting edge, it now sounds dated. Whereas like the Lexicon of Love was done in a way that didn't use an instantly recognizable version of a Fairlight or samplings. It still sounds fantastic today. And of course you've got Trevor.
Yeah, I think you find albums like that, and they also it's the collision of the many things within the album. Like we mentioned, you know, the songs, the lyrics, the singer, the rhythm section, the production, which I use to mean everything else, the timing that it comes out, what else is going on around it. Lexicon of Love came along in amongst a whole bunch of other stuff in that timeline that made, in my feeling about it, was that it became clear right at the moment because it was so different and it entered the zeitgeist, is that the word? And it had a special place in it almost instantly. But there are lots of records that I worked on, for example, I know, that were in some ways trying to emulate the Fairlighty thing, that were clearly never going to be that.
All I'm saying, it takes a lot to love you. All I'm doing, you know it's true. All I mean now is one thing, yes, one thing that turns this grey sky to blue. That's the look, that's the look, the look of love. That's the look, that's the look, the look of love. That's the look.
Duran Duran did a reflex, and that it dates it. It just makes it of that era. Whereas like ABC Lexicon of Love, as an example, is just a classic record.
As you say, it's timeless.
I mean, we love that album. I mean, if you can put a word into Martin for us, it'd be fantastic.
Oh yeah, so the one we're putting. So JJ, obviously you're at ZTT with Trevor, with Anne, with Gary. A mad time in the 80s. Like the whole ZTT thing sort of completely exploded. What was that like? I mean, was that period as mad as exhausting as it looked to us from the outside? Because the output was just incredible, and the quality of it as well. But it must have been a mad time for you guys.
It was, and I think I remember going into the studio, which is in Basing Street, which is now also some very nice flats, sadly. And there was a chap called Dave Megan, and he was asleep on the sofa. And I went, "Hi, Dave, you all right? Did you go home?" He went, "No." And he finished at 00 something and had a session at 10 and decided that it wasn't worth going home, and he slept on the sofa. There was 3 studios there, and some little spaces where we did bits and pieces as well. And so there was something going on in all of them all the time.
Wow.
And I think there were periods when I was working 6 days a week, and maybe Saturdays off, for months and months and months. It was mayhem.
Yeah.
But there were also periods of kind of, you know, you're talking about the kind of collision of technology in some respects, because the stuff we were using to record on 16, 24 track, 48 track even, it was at that point where it was really, really good, but also becoming a bit dated, right? So you had the SSLs, you had all that stuff, and the total recall and all this, and there's a lot of time being consumed sorting problems out.
Yeah.
Because this is like Apollo 13, you know, not
Yeah.
working. So what's going on? You know, I remember one session, it wasn't necessarily at ZTT, but we came in and hit the play button from the last night, and there was time code everywhere. Every fader, every return, there was time code. And so get the guys in, and it wasn't until someone looked at the fault log, right, that they realized that the guys, someone from the night shift had been in and done some work on a patch bay, right? And these patch bays, you know, enormous things.
Yeah.
Many inputs. So you might be able to totally recall the desk, but you've also got to recall all the patches.
Yes.
And it's like a spaghetti junction. Anyway, so someone, oh, look, 4 o'clock in the morning, someone took the patch plate bits. There's a good reason for it, because there was a hum, right? And now there's time code everywhere. Because I remember we'd said there's a noise on the patch. So the tech guy clearly thought, okay, I'll take the patch plate bits and sort it out. And he found the source of the hum and sorted that out, but managed to reconfigure it in a way that this time code appeared everywhere, because he basically swapped 2 rows over without realizing it. And it took several hours
To work it out.
to work out what was going on. Someone said, hang on, isn't row 2 with row 1? Swap them over, all fine. And so, although it was mad and mental, there were times when the kind of tech, it was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not necessarily at ZTT, but for example, during the Yes album, Steve Howe went off to do some guitar overdubs in another studio. So he'd take a 2-track mix and then go and work 24 tracks somewhere else and then come back. And Gary discovered that the tech machines were running at ever so slightly the wrong speed.
No.
So you had all this technology, right? And you were backing around doing all this stuff, and then there'd be this, and then someone had to figure out a way to fix it. So there was quite a lot of, pauses. I remember I was helping the propaganda guys do some programming, pre-programming for something. We're using that. What was that black drum box? It was black and blue. DMX, was it? I can't remember. And we were programming this way. And one of the guys said, "Oh, that snare's just horrible. It's in the wrong place." And he said, how do you get rid of it? And I said, whilst it's playing, hit down record and delete the drum you want to delete, and it'll delete the note. He said, like this. And I went, while it's playing. Right. He wiped the song, basically. And so, you know, had to rebuild the whole thing again. So that was another day. And then all that stuff of people putting backups on cassettes, right? You know, before the little floppies came in.
Yeah.
A backup's not worked, you know, and it was so there was quite a lot of frustration in as much as you're working flat out all the time, but there are also these big blocks of kind of like, something weird's happened.
Once upon a time when we were friends, I gave you my heart. The story ends. No happy ever. The five-town diamond skippers. Yeah, the pleasure of rope rippers. All those dark and lovely skippers. Those five-town diamond skippers. The skip-a-doos double dutch. That's them dancing.
So that's it for another episode of the Electronic Cafe. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with the incredible JJ. JJ, thank you, my friend. Enjoyed every single second of it. Absolute joy to meet you. We've got lots more great stuff coming down the pipe for the Electronic Cafe, including, don't forget, our very first live event, March 25th, 2023, at the Water Rats, where we are going to bring you the amazing National Milk Bar, Cult with No Name, and Beautiful Machines. An amazing night in music. I'll ask Mark to put the link down here again so you can get tickets while you can. There's only 200 available. About half have gone already. We only put it up a week ago. So we know this is going to be a sellout. So please come along to this event. You won't regret it. And if it all goes well, we'll be doing more of those as the 2023 goes along. So lots of great, exciting stuff coming through the Electronic Cafe. New bands, new music, and interviewing some legends. Keep your eyes and ears out for us. We're aiming to make ears happy around the world. See you next time. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
As always, thanks again for watching the Electronic Cafe. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.